we are affecting regulations, and nobody has a say for what we use when we go out and turn on our car tonight and go home and turn on our lights. And I think the faster we bring this home to us, even if we don't have every question answered, the better. Because then we will be living with what we've put most of the world through right now. Yes, it will impact us. It will impact fishermen. We will have views that are impaired. But at least it'll be in our backyard. And if we don't want it, what we can do is stop using as much electricity as we do. That would be the first step.
That was a very perceptive question, because the question really comes down to which alternative do you choose? And no matter what alternative, there are going to be impacts. One of the things we don't talk about is what are the impacts of doing nothing? There are good reasons, let's not do offshore wind because of whales, let's not do onshore wind because of views, let's not do coal because of CO2, let's not do Maine Yankee again. There are always good reasons not to do something, but then you end up with a situation where the status quo continues into the indefinite future to all of our detriment. I'm old enough to remember a guy named Mark Saul who once said, if you hold a consistent political opinion in this country long enough, you will eventually be tried for treason. And I sort of feel like that because, as I said, I advocated for hydro, and rooms just like this full of angry people about hydro. There's a cost to everything. So the question is, what's the lowest cost? What's the one that makes the most sense, given the various values that we have? I concluded that I think views score below particulates and CO2 in the atmosphere.
Let's take another question. Yes, ma'am, right here.
Very short question, no point in standing up. Are we hearing about geothermal? And I'm curious to know what the downsides of geothermal are.
Anyone know?
There's a guy here who's actually installing geothermal. The key thing to know about geothermal is it takes electricity to make it work. That you get the power, the energy that's stored in the earth, but it takes electricity to move it out. And that's geothermal heat pumps are a huge opportunity for Maine. But remember I said at the beginning, we're going to see an upsurge in electrical demand. It's because of that and for plug-in cars. So we're going to move from fossil fuels toward electricity. The question then becomes, where does the electricity come from?
Here's someone who wants to add to that.
Well, actually not to that, but I've got a bit of a curveball question for you. Mount Washington is the windiest place in the world, so we hear. I know it isn't in Maine, but it could power New England if small economical turbines were done in the non-scenic parts. I would suggest the possibility of having engineered maybe 30, 40-foot wind turbines that could handle up to 300-mile-an-hour wind, which doesn't mean they're going to be going like an airplane propeller, but designed so that they can handle that wind creatively and put that into productive use.
Joanne, you haven't had a chance to talk in a while. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah. Why not? I'd just like to bring up this subject about jobs and if the wind turbines are made in the United States and everybody gets jobs and it would be great for the economy. There's such a thing called rare earths. China has 95% of the rare earths used in the manufacture of the turbines. They have decided that they're going to cut down on their exports of these rare earths. Toyota has been scrounging around looking for an open pit where they even went to Vietnam. But there's a guy out in California that's going to reopen his pit out there. There are probably a ton a ton of rare earth elements and metals in each of these turbines. 700 pounds of heavy and light magnets in each turbine made of these rare metals. If we can't get these rare metals at a decent price, guess who's going to be making the turbines? I'm one of those people that don't like to buy stuff that is going to hurt American workers. I'm very upset, and I think maybe in the future somebody will come up with a turbine that won't use these rare metals, rare earth metals.
Let's get some more questions. How about you, sir?
Thanks. I have a question for Lynn Williams. The major employment sectors in the state, timber, fishing, financial services, tourism, the vast majority of the output of those sectors goes to people out of state. Does that make them bad? Should we not like the lobster industry because the great majority of lobsters are sold to people out of state? And if not, why does it upset us that we ship the electricity out of state?
I have no problem with exports of any of our products, but most of the things you're mentioning do not show the impacts that industrial wind has on the host, and in many cases, if not most, involuntary host communities. What we're forgetting here in this whole dialogue, I think, is that there's such a thing as non-industrial wind development. To me, industrial development is a product of the Industrial Revolution, and I think we've moved way beyond that. When I worked for Jerry Brown in the 70s and early 80s in California, we talked about things on a local and regional level. I think, I'll be blunt, we need to get out of ISO New England, we need to get off the grid, and we need to establish regional, publicly owned power authorities.
There was a little bit of discussion about conservation and efficiency, and I think a lot more of the focus ought to be on that issue because we need to reduce our consumption of energy, that's for sure. And one of the simplest ways we can do that, in fact, the low-hanging fruit, the thing that pays the greatest return on investment, is conservation and efficiency. Insulating our basements, insulating our attics, taking out our old oil burners and putting in LP, 96% efficient gas burners that modulate on outside temperature, putting in storm windows, those types of things. If we use the money that's being directed towards subsidizing big wind, which amounts to about $10,000 per household, about $4.3 billion of the $7 billion that it's going to take to put 2,700 megawatts of wind turbines in Maine's mountains. If that money was directed towards the plumbers and electricians and carpenters in this state that really are sitting around wondering how they're going to feed their kids, we could put thousands of people back to work in all the towns in this state. And instead, we're giving money to Reed and Reed and Chambro so they can blast roads to the tops of our mountains. We're paying stimulus money that our grandchildren are going to have to pay back to Angus King so that he can put turbines made in China or someplace else, not in this country, on our ridges. And it's insane public policy. It is absolutely insane. We should stop doing it.
That was incredibly well said, okay? The fact is that the economics of wind power is a joke. Two-thirds of the cost of these projects are being subsidized by our tax dollars. Per megawatt hour, okay? And I'm going to give you a breakdown here in terms of subsidies, because they always like to say, well, we subsidize other forms of power. But per megawatt hour, wind is, and this is according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, put out in 2008, wind is subsidized at $23.34 per megawatt hour. Natural gas, 25 cents. Coal, 44 cents.